All right, everyone, let's try this again. I'm Carrie Bartholomew, otherwise known as Cara Marcel on YouTube. And if you're here, if you're new here, my focus is to talk about culture. I'm an educator, I'm a parent, and I care deeply, deeply about what it is that our kids are experiencing, what they're learning, and also what they're not learning. Like so many of you, I started asking questions as I started to see our kids absorb less than us when they have so many more opportunities. And the more I looked, the more I realized that something is definitely wrong. So, on this channel, we are going to talk about all of those things through a lens of truth and a lens of common sense. Because what our kids are being taught matters. And as parents, we deserve to understand it. Now, there was a warning given decades ago, and most of us were taught that we should ignore that warning. In fact, it was mocked and called the Red Scare. In fact, that's how most people learn about it today. Is it's something to be aware of those people who say these things. But perhaps we shouldn't have been, because in 1957, Major William E. Mayer cautioned that if communism ever came to America, it would not call itself communism. It would be dressed in familiar language, words like progress, liberal, and even freedom. It would not be here to expand liberty, but instead to redefine it. And so, in this first episode, based on The Devil and Karl Marx, I'm going to share with you some of my notes. Today, we're going back to the 1930s to look at the strategy behind these ideas. I'm going to make sure I can be heard now. All right. So communism came into the church, and that is simply something that cannot be denied. One of the very first people who spoke about this was Bella Dodd. Bella Dodd was originally, I have to go back into my notes. Bella Dodd came over here from Italy. And as she got older, she was attracted to the Communist Party, and the Communist Party told her she shouldn't get married and she shouldn't have children. That's not what a good communist would do. So she didn't. And instead, she put all of her energy into becoming a organizer. Now, this is very important that you hear that word organizer, because it's going to repeat over and over again throughout history. And that's what I kind of like to do, is focus on those threads. Those, what I always tell my students is, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. It sounds extremely similar. And in this case, well, it's pretty much repeating. It's that it never stopped. So the 1930s strategy was to come into the churches and come into our other institutions, especially public education, to come into these institutions and to reframe what we ever thought about them. So the first thing that she did is she focused on the seminary. She was a Catholic, and so she focused on the seminaries, and she famously said they brought 1,100 atheists into the seminary to become priests in the 1930s. Now let's think about that. The 1930s, today is 2020, or we're in 2026. So we are 4 years short of 100 years of an infiltration of people who have arranged the way that religion flows, who don't even believe in it. All right. Not only did she focus on the churches, but she also focused on education, and she became a major leader for the teachers union, major organizer, and they did the same thing. They brought communists into the school system. And today, I think it would be you'd be very hard pressed to prove that Randy Weingarten is not an actual communist. I'm sure she'd call herself a democratic socialist, but that's what the USSR decided to do. They decided that they would change words like communism, which had a distaste. Right in the 1930s, people had come out of the Depression. They were able to purchase the American dream. Dad was able to go to work, mom was able to stay home and raise the kids, and on the surface, it looked beautiful. And so they couldn't come in and say, "We're gonna take away your middle class dream," because those people could remember it wasn't that long before they all struggled. And so the first people they went to what they called the ghetto classes. They went to the African American churches and they said, "We're gonna introduce communism." And they said, "Oh, no, you're not. We are God-fearing people. We already have our faith. We don't need that." So instead, they said, "All right." And they went back and they thought about it and they said, "Let's call it social justice. Let's call it the social gospel. Let's make Jesus all about equity." All the same words, you guys. All the exact same words that we thought were new after 2020. At least the average layman person. We thought they were new. And they've been here for 100 years almost. Now, let me give you an example of what we're seeing today in Mr. James Tallarico. Mr. James Tallarico is currently a congressman in Texas, or I think he's running for Congress. I think he's running for Senate. Here's who he is. This is just a quote from him. "The only thing worse than a tyrant is a tyrant who thinks they're on a mission from God." I'm laughing because it's exactly who he is. Mr. Tallarico believes that he is on a mission to fundamentally change what religion says. He believes in the Gospel of Thomas and he believes it should be put back in. Now, today I was listening to some excerpts from the Gospel of Thomas, and here's just one little piece. Um, there's stuff about you should disrobe and all sorts of when the man is no longer a man and the woman is no longer a woman, then they've reached pure enlightenment. That's what the Gospel of Thomas is about. So it says, "And what you discover as you read the Gospel of Thomas, which you are meant to discover, is that you and Jesus, at a deep level, are identical twins." Mr. Tallarico presents himself as a Christian. So if he's a Christian, he has just neutered, I love that word right now, neutered Christ. He has just said he's not your savior because you're equal to him. How could he save you? You're just equal with Christ. So that's what Mr. Tallarico believes, and he is favored to win, at least right now, his election. And a lot of people say that he will save democracy. Now, here's another thing. Democracy is not what we are. But this is how that language starts to change and starts to reframe. So we have multiple people who will say things like, um, everything's a threat to democracy, right? The thing is that we're a constitutional republic. And the reason that we're a constitutional republic is because we don't want authoritarianism. We don't want mob rule. It took me about a week to get through creating this one because I read the horror of what the Bolsheviks did. And I want to just make a really quick disclaimer here. I know that there are people who are on this side and that side of the Jewish conversation. I have no interest in that conversation. What I am interested in is what makes people evil. And I do not believe that it's their race. Not at all. So it doesn't matter to me if a person is black or white or Asian or Hispanic or anything else. People can be good and people can be evil. Most of us are somewhere in between. But authoritarianism makes people fully evil because they impose their will. And it's so frustrating to hear words like, oh, you're a fascist. When a fascist, to be a true fascist, it requires force. And let's be real. If you know me, you know that I am a conservative. I'm a classically liberal conservative. And here's where we have a massive problem in my side of things because we're so freaking independent that we can't get together. We cannot align, but yet we're supposed to be fascist and impose which one of our wills on everyone. See, you can believe that being religious is ideal. You can believe that homeschool is ideal or that public school is ideal. But it's when you push your will on others, that's when you become evil. And when you push your will on others to the point that you delight in crushing them, that's what we're dealing with. That's what I'm most concerned about. And I had no idea the levels of what that could go through until I started reading this book. And if you read this book and you are a sensitive person, then be careful with chapter 5. Next week, I'm going to discuss what Karl Marx's actual religion was, because see, so many people think it's just a financial idea. It's just about economics. Well, Karl was a deadbeat who mooched off of people. And we'll dig more into that, but that's not the focus of today. So we've got Bella Dodd, we've got James Tallarico, and there were some real concerns. This is why they weren't necessarily evil. And that's one of the things we have to realize is that a lot of people will join these organizations, these groups, because they do want to do good and because there are real concerns. African Americans were not being treated very well in this time. However, they were doing well than many are doing today because they had influences like Booker T. Washington telling them to pick up your buckets where you are, as opposed to people saying, oh, poor you, you are oppressed and the world owes you something, so just sit and wait for it. Or burn things down. So that's where Manning Johnson comes in. Manning Johnson saw real injustice and he wanted that injustice to change. And so he joined the Communist Party because he listened to what they said and he became very high up in the Communist Party. And he still realized that these white progressives would not let him even enter the same doorway with them. They had to go through the back, no different than the other people. And he realized it and he became disillusioned with it because he realized that their real struggle was being used to push another agenda. And I promise you, that's where we are today. This morning or this afternoon, I was speaking to a group of people, a group of immigrants, and they came here seeking something better. So they wanted something better, and some of them have gotten wrapped up in the DEI of my group deserves because we've been through this. But what I explained to them is that you're just a Trojan horse. You're just the Trojan horse to walk in so that they can bring something else in, and that something else is going to be something you don't agree with. That something else is going to be queer ideology. And let me make it really clear on that one. Queer is not anti-gay, anti-lesbian. Queer is anti-normal. So these people, which tend to be African Americans and Latins, and really anybody except for the white liberal, tend to value their families. I'm going to change that, not white liberal, white leftist. They tend to value their families. They tend to want their families to be better off than they were. They tend to appreciate capitalism because they lived without it. They like free will, and they're religious. But you're going to take all of that away and instead say, well, we need to focus on welcoming so that minorities feel okay. And then we're going to make gender the main minority. And I watch these people in this room and their jaws kind of drop and some of them shaking their heads. But that's where we are. So they were just pawns, not any different than they were in Manning Johnson's time. His book is called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. And I think it's kind of excellent, this one, because it says critical race theory and social justice glossary of terms are included in the book, but you can also watch it on YouTube. I don't know who the guy is, but there's a wonderful man who talks about this color communism and common sense. So these people, they were community organizers and they were very effective. And one of the things that I'm just going to move this up. What they would do, what the communists did is they used words. So first they said, we're not going to use communism because that's distasteful. So let's use socialism. Let's use progressive. And we should be concerned with words like progressive because one of their comments is you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. So it's anything to move forward. Okay. So queer theory, which is what this all comes down to. It all comes down to queer theory because queer is a rejection of anything normal. Anything normal. This is why you must destroy families. That's why you must destroy faith. And not just destroy, not just make them go away, but mock them. You must break the will of people. So it's a very ugly thing. And it is not hateful to say, no, thank you. I don't want anything to do with that. But see, they use words like hateful. And they say that when something is, they say that if you don't agree with them, that you're hateful. And they manipulate. So they had this organization, and it was called the Open Hand. I want to say the Open Hand Society, but I don't think that's what it was called. But it was the Open Hand, and what it was the Open Hand Coalition. And what it would do is it would get all of these groups that wouldn't necessarily agree with certain things, but they would agree with some of the things, and that made the whole group larger. And we have that today. We have groups like Mormon Women for Ethical Government, aligned with maybe a Islamic group, aligned with an Episcopalian group. And while they don't all go to the same churches, they all agree that they're anti-war and anti-fascist. Again, though, these groups are some of the most domineering, some of the most authoritarian people, and they have the most authoritarian ideas. Right now, we're dealing with a situation where they brought in a judge. They got a I want to say a petition. I can't think of the word. I'm so sorry, but they brought in that whenever they don't like a bill, they can have a petition so that people can sign a ballot initiative. They can sign a ballot and have it removed. So our legislators have virtually no power. But when we use the same thing against them, they have the money and the funding because of their big coalitions to completely gut what we've done. And it is basically just a spit in your face. It's a mockery of a system because you're being colonized. It is no different. And it's been going on for nearly 100 years, and we did not know. Did you know? So let's talk about one more community organizer and how this all became something that's now in our faces and it can't be denied. This community organizer, most of us have heard of. If you haven't heard of Manning Johnson or Bella Dodd, there's a lot of information on them online. There's no actual document of her saying that 1100 thing, but she spoke at many, many Catholic things because she ultimately regretted her decision. Manning saw through what it was, but she regretted that she brought so many young people, basically the drama kids. She brought the drama kids into the church, and she took those kiddos and uh she wanted atheists. So they would come into the church and they would water down the message. They would turn the message into something pushing a communist agenda into the churches. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like, because in Russia, they changed the scriptures, literally changed the Bible from saying, be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove, to be gentle as a dove, gentle as a dove, gentle as a dove. Just like this heavy influence on being a peacekeeper rather than a peacemaker. So the manipulation has been going on for a really long time. And here is our final community organizer. I decided to be a community organizer because change won't come from the top, I would say. Change will come from mobilized grassroots. Well, my friends, today there's so many NGOs, and these NGOs tend to, not always, I actually work with two who are not, but tend to have a progressive agenda. And you have to be so careful in your language, your in your application, to not sound at all conservative to get approved as an NGO. But if you're on the left and you're pushing a progressive cause, literally anything goes. Anything. So we are paying for our own downfall. And so when people take pictures and say, I can't believe these people are being arrested, this is so terrible, we've got to stop this. Or when people say, I can't believe we're at war, we've been betrayed, we've got to stop this. My question is, and what is your solution? What is your solution? Because authoritarianism cannot be the alternative. Having people who hate us and who would delight in crushing us cannot be the alternative. Having people who will teach our own children to hate us and to justify, our own kids to justify and dance when someone gets shot in the neck for speaking cannot be the alternative. And while we are fractured in all of these different groups, and my way's right, nope, my way's right, and you can't even agree at like the 80% mark, these groups are marching forward. It's called the Long March through the institutions. And these people are marching forward with their agenda. And every single time you go, oh, well, that thing really upset me, so now I'm just going to stop, give up, and follow that. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. I decided to become a community organizer because change won't come from the top, I would say. Change will only come from mobilized. Well, they're mobilizing our kids and they're mobilizing our churches. That's where we're at today. I'm going to see if I have any notes. Still the same there. Okay. I'm so sorry that I had that volume thing at the end. When it gets up, I will rechange that. Thank you so much for watching. We are leaving, but I think I'll do my next episode on Wednesday, and it will be digging into what Karl Marx really thought about religion, and just the fact that atheism is not a peaceful tolerance for all. All right, you guys, thanks so much and have a great night. Bye.